Darian Mensah transferring in from Tulane to be the starting quarterback, the $4 million man. And it's really interesting to see how Duke is going to do this season. Their third straight season with a new quarterback, but the last two have gone pretty well as they've outperformed expectations both times. The first time with Riley Leonard, who ended up making the national championship with Notre Dame. And last season, it was Malik Murphy, who is now an Oregon State Beaver. This year, Mensah is going to start off his Duke career with a home game against Elon. That will be a very easy win. And then it's another home game, but this time against a very good team in Illinois. This Fighting Illini team returns Luke Altmaier at the quarterback position and is a top 15 team in our poll preseason. We think that Illinois is going to be a really good team this year, but Duke has a lot of potential to start the season. And I think that Darian Mensah is going to lead the Blue Devils to another really good year. We have them upsetting Illinois at home in week two.
The big reason here could be that the hype that Illinois is getting might get to them early on in the season, and it might take them a couple weeks to really become that really dominant team that a lot of people are expecting them to be with Luke Altmaier returning. And I think Duke, with so much returning talent from last season, essentially the team is unchanged on the defensive side, and offensively, they have two new wide receivers coming in from the transfer portal along with Darian Mensah. So everything is going to be very similar to last year, and considering the success the Blue Devils had, I think they will be the better team against Illinois here, especially at home. Following week is going to be on the road against Tulane. Darian Mensah already facing off against his former school. And prior to doing the schedule previews earlier on this year, Tulane was a team that at least I thought was going to be pretty solid next year because they have been one of the more dominant group of five teams the last few seasons. But they've had some issues finding a starting quarterback even though they brought in a good amount through the transfer portal, whether it was through some outside issues or them converting to different positions. I believe one of their quarterbacks switched to a tight end. So Tulane, in my mind, has become less of a threat to a team like Duke, especially with Darian Mensah coming in. I think he is going to be electric right out of the gate for the Blue Devils. So they will move to 3-0 here before facing NC State.
This will be an intriguing matchup. CJ Bailey back for the Wolfpack after his freshman season. And I do think that he's going to lead a solid NC State offense. This is a team that's maybe a little bit underrated this year after underperforming expectations last season. I think that even though Duke is at home, there's potential for NC State to pull off this win. And after pulling off some big wins early in the season, like Illinois, like a win at Tulane, like Connor was saying, Duke might be a little bit full of themselves heading into ACC play. I think they get a little bit of a reality check here and drop to 3-1 in a game that most people probably wouldn't expect them to lose.
And once again, like Jonah was saying, CJ Bailey returning after his electric freshman year, it's just the youth on this Wolfpack team that makes them so hard to judge. If they all grow and turn out to be really, really good players, this NC State team could easily compete in the ACC. But if that youth gets the better of them and that inexperience comes to play, then NC State can see a similar result to what they had last season. So it's really hard to predict right now, but I do think there is some upset potential. And like Jonah was saying, especially this early on in the season, we could see Duke dropping this game. The following week on the road against Syracuse, I don't think they will drop this game here, even though Syracuse is bringing in Steve Angeli from Notre Dame to be their starting quarterback, most likely. Definitely going to be a downgrade from Kyle McCord last year, who led all of the FBS in passing yards on his way to the NFL draft. And along with that, Syracuse is just losing so many offensive weapons in basically every single skill position, their running backs, their wide receivers, and their tight ends. It's just going to be a completely different team from last year. I think they will see a pretty significant amount of regression despite the talent they're bringing in. And I think Duke will get a bounce back win on the road here for their first ACC win. And then they remain on the road, this time going all the way to the West Coast to face the California Golden Bears. Cal was a team that we were very high on initially after the 2024 season concluded. And since then, they have lost a significant amount of players, including star running back Jaden Ott, who is now an Oklahoma Sooner. He was going to be the focal point of their offense, along with bringing in Devin Brown to compete for their starting quarterback job, along with a secondary that was one of the better secondaries last season, even with some of them departing for the NFL. Now, with all the players in the transfer portal, I think Cal is going to see a lot of regression and is not going to be nearly the same team that they were last year. This game is going to be a pretty easy one skill-wise for Duke, even if it is a long road trip. They will move to 5-1 going into their first bye week.
And after that, it's a matchup with Haynes King and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. A matchup that includes two of our ACC dark horses in Duke and Georgia Tech. And I think this is going to be a really good game. Darian Mensah and Haynes King, both very solid quarterbacks. A lot of offensive firepower in this one. Despite Georgia Tech being a very solid team that we think has the potential to pull off some major upsets this season, I think that Duke is going to defend the home field here and pull off a very impressive win over a really, really good Georgia Tech team.
And I think that comes down to the defense. Like I was saying, Duke returning so much of their starting defense from last year, or at least players that were in the program last season, particularly on the defensive line. I think that's going to be enough to contain Haynes King and this really explosive Georgia Tech offense. They have their second and final bye week right after that, so only one game in between their two bye weeks. And then they're on the road to face the Clemson Tigers, the favorites to come out of the ACC, and rightfully so, considering Cade Klubnik is back as their starting quarterback, an early Heisman favorite. They have Peter Woods and TJ Parker on the defensive line, who are top five talents in next year's NFL draft. Dabo Swinney has been utilizing the transfer portal finally and has really brought this Clemson team back into the limelight. They are once again a early contender for the college football championship. And I really don't see how Duke is going to be able to slow down this Tigers team, especially on the road in Death Valley. Yes, Darian Mensah is a very solid quarterback, and there is a lot of returning players to this Duke team that has a lot of success the last 3 years. I don't think it's going to matter when you're playing against one of the best coaches in college football and just such a phenomenal team. This Clemson team is going to get a win and drop Duke to 6-2.
And then it's a really interesting game on the schedule, a road trip to UConn. Not many Power Four teams schedule road trips to Group of Five teams. Duke did it twice this year. And I think that UConn's going to have a solid team again this year. But to be honest, they're just not going to be able to slow down Darian Mensah and this Duke offense. I think the Blue Devils should be able to take care of business pretty handily on the road to get back in the win column up to 7-2. And then it's a home game with Virginia. The Cavaliers going to be a decent team this year. Every year they always have the potential to pull off, an upset or two. But I don't really see it being over this Duke team. Duke just they have so much talent on both sides of the ball, significantly more than Virginia. I really can't see Virginia competing in this game. And I do think that Duke will be able to again get a pretty easy win to move to 8-2 heading into their big rivalry game.
And that is against North Carolina on the road at Chapel Hill. And this is going to be a game that's going to probably see a lot of celebrity fans and just a super loud crowd, considering that Bill Belichick is now the head coach of the Tar Heels and has built a pretty decent team using the transfer portal. You got Gio Lopez to be a starting quarterback out of South Alabama, one of the more sought after quarterbacks, and has really utilized this transfer portal to build this team. They did see some departures of key players such as Bo Atkinson, who was likely going to be their defensive star on the D line. And not to mention the off the field distractions that are associated with North Carolina, especially with Bill Belichick. All that being said, I do think North Carolina in year one under Bill Belichick will get a rivalry win over this Duke team. It's going to be an upset because, once again, I do think Duke is probably the more talented team in general. But in a rivalry game like this, I could see Duke falling. on the road.
And I think the Duke team coming into the game at 8-2 is probably going to have a decent ranking next to their name as well. This is, again, like we've been saying, a really solid team to close out the season. They'll have Wake Forest, we believe one of the worst teams in the ACC. I don't think there's much competition here. Duke should finish the year pretty easily there at 9-3. So a significant improvement from our way too early prediction of 7-5. The projection back then was 6.6 wins and 5.4 losses. That is up a significant amount to 7.95 wins, 4.85 and 3.15 in the ACC. The floor for the Blue Devils is going to be 6-6. I think that there really isn't much way, in our opinion, that they miss a bowl game this season. Like we've been saying all video with Darian Mensah transferring in, this is a potent Blue Devils offense. A bowl game should be worst case scenario for Duke. Best case scenario, I think that we could see Duke get double digit wins. The schedule's not really that difficult. They have the potential to maybe push for a college football playoff berth and an ACC title berth if they can hit this max win ceiling of 10-2. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you in our next video.